A young girl disappeared without a trace from the parking lot of an apartment complex, leaving only her shoes on the asphalt. The police began an investigation and realized that they had absolutely no leads. None of the residents of the complex saw anything strange, but several people immediately heard a piercing female scream. Solving the case seemed like an impossible task, but detectives were eventually able to discover the shocking truth thanks to one chance. Brooke Wilberger was born on February 20, 1985 in California, into a large, friendly family. She had 3 sisters and 2 brothers. Her parents were deeply religious people and took an active part in the life of religious communities. Later, the family moved to the city of Eugene, located in a neighboring state, where Brooke graduated from the local school with honors. After that, she entered Brigham Young University, located in Utah, almost 1,500 kilometers from her home. Brooke wanted to become a doctor and help children with speech disorders. At the end of 2004, when she was 19 years old, the girl graduated from her first year and went on summer vacation. Her older sister and her husband worked as managers at an apartment complex in Corvallis, Oregon. They offered Brooke to work for them for a few months, and she agreed. Thanks to this opportunity, the girl could not only earn extra money during the holidays, but also see her family regularly. Her parents lived just an hour's drive from this city. Her tasks included any possible help, cleaning, laundry, shopping, and other duties that Brooke could easily cope with. The complex was quite small and in a good area, close to the University of Oregon. On the morning of May 24, the girl went to the complex's parking lot to wash the small street lamps located around the perimeter. Her older sister said she would take the child to school and be back in about an hour, after which they would do some other work. However, by the time she returned to the complex, Brooke was nowhere to be found. Her sister thought she was still washing the lanterns, so the first thing she did was walk along the parking lot. And there a strange discovery awaited her. On the ground lay the slippers that Brooke had worn that day. Next to them stood a bucket of water and rags, which the girl used for work. The sister noticed that one of the slippers was torn, and the whole situation seemed very suspicious to her. She walked around the complex, but Brooke was nowhere to be found, but all her belongings, including her purse, wallet, keys, and even her clothes, were still there. Her car was parked. The sister suspected that something bad might have happened to him, so she decided to contact the police. By law, you had to wait 24 hours before filing a missing persons report. However, in this case, the police believed that the girl might actually be in danger. Therefore, we decided to immediately begin searching. According to her sister's story, they believed that Brooke might have been kidnapped. First of all, they visited all the apartments in the complex, interviewing local residents. Out of 250 people, 3 immediately said that they heard a woman scream between 10 and 11 o'clock. But when they looked outside, they did not see anything suspicious there. The police were unable to find any potential evidence or witnesses, but the residents' stories of a woman's scream only confirmed their suspicion of a kidnapping. As a result, they decided to search the area around the complex, since there were simply no leads. Information about Brooke's disappearance quickly spread throughout the area, and hundreds of volunteers contacted the police wanting to take part in the search. These were mostly people from local church parishes. They knew that the girl's family was deeply religious and wanted to help. In total, more than 300 people joined the search. Some combed the area, others interviewed people on the streets, and others posted leaflets with information about Brooke's disappearance. Despite this, the police were unable to find a single witness or even the slightest clue. It looked like the girl just disappeared in the middle of the parking lot. Only 4 days later, detectives told reporters that they had 4 suspects and named one of them, who turned out to be 30-year-old Sung Kim. The local police department had known this name for a long time. Kim was repeatedly accused of stealing women's underwear from 3 different university dormitories and laundries. considering that Brooke worked in a complex located on the territory of the university. The police assumed his involvement in the kidnapping. It is not known whether they had any additional evidence, but detectives decided that Kim could hold the girl hostage, so they decided to storm his house, where the man lived with his parents and other relatives. In the middle of the night, special forces burst into the house without much ceremony with all family members. As a result, Kim's father was injured, and thousands of dollars worth of property was damaged in the home. During the search, police found almost 3,500 items of women's underwear. Kim attached tags to many of them, signing when and where they were stolen. Among all these broadcasts, they found 10 pairs of underwear stolen from a student who lived in the very complex from which Brooke disappeared. 7 rifles were also found in the house, but that wasn't the worst thing. 3 computers were found in Kim's collection, the contents of which shocked detectives. They contained more than 40,000 images of women who were subjected to various types of torture. Part of this collection also contained footage of minors. In addition, a text document was found on the computers in which Kim outlined a plan to kidnap and kill a woman. There was even a list of things that might be needed for such a crime. All this was enough to arrest the man. His relatives assured that on the morning of May 24 he was at home. They said he was trading stocks from his sister's computer. But the detectives admitted that the family could simply be covering for him and were 100% sure that it was he who kidnapped Brooke. In this regard, the court set bail for Kim in the amount of $10 million, which is a colossal amount. Despite this, the police were unable to find any connection with Brooke's disappearance, and the man himself denied any involvement. Without any evidence, detectives could not take the case to court. But Kim still received a number of charges related to the theft of items and prohibited materials on his computers. As a result, the court sentenced him to 11 years in prison, and the police eventually stopped considering him a suspect in the Brooke case. Kim's family subsequently sued the police department, resulting in several $100,000 in compensation. Unfortunately, in the months that followed, detectives came no closer to solving the case. Brooke's disappearance was repeatedly covered on federal channels. People contacted the police with various tips, but they all led to a dead end. In early autumn, detectives received their first serious lead. They were contacted by a woman who was walking through the university grounds on the day of Brooke's disappearance, a kilometer from her complex. At some point, a green van stopped in front of her, and men got out and headed towards her. He asked her to tell her the way to some place and said that there was a map in his van. The men wanted the girl to go with him to the car, but she refused and left. Some time later, the police received a similar call. The woman was walking along the parking lot a few hundred meters from where Brooke disappeared. A man in a green van drove up to her and asked how he could get to a certain place. But the girl did not dare to come close and left. This happened the same morning Brooke disappeared. Unfortunately, the police were never able to find the owner of this van, since both girls did not remember the license plate and model. 6 months after Brooke disappeared, detectives received a new lead, and this time more significant. In the city of Albuquerque, more than 2,000 kilometers from Corvallis, a 20-year-old student was walking home. As she walked past the parking lot, a man got out of the car behind her and attacked her. Threatening the girl with a weapon, he forced her into the car and then drove off to a remote area. There he subjected her to violence, after which he tied her up and left her in the car, while he went off somewhere. The victim did not wait for his return and tried to get rid of the bandages on his arms. When she finally succeeded, she grabbed her jacket and ran outside. She was not wearing any other clothes. Having run some distance, she came to a road full of cars. The girl tried to ask for help, but not a single driver stopped. A little further, she noticed a cafe and ran in to ask the employees to call the police. But they simply kicked her out onto the street. Luckily, a woman passing by noticed her and agreed to help. The victim got into her car, and they called the police, waiting for the police in the cafe parking lot. A few minutes later, the girl noticed that her kidnapper's car was standing on the other side of the road, and he was watching her. The men only left when a police car arrived at the scene. The victim gave them a detailed description of the kidnapper and his car. Thanks to this, detectives were able to find him within 2 hours. The perpetrator was identified as 39-year-old Joel Patrick Courtney, who already had an extensive criminal history. Since adolescence, he was constantly caught by the police for crimes of varying severity, from illegal substances to attempts to abuse various girls, including his own sister. At the age of 19, he went to prison for the first time after he tried to abuse and injure his girlfriend. Upon his release, he traveled to different states and then got married. They had 3 children, but the family could not be called happy. His wife repeatedly complained that Patrick constantly beat her and the children. Despite this, she was in no hurry to divorce him, and in 2004, the family moved to Portland, Oregon. A relative helped him get a job at a construction firm where Patrick had access to a working green van. Upon closer examination, detectives determined that the man was in Corvallis on the same day that Brooke was abducted. A month later, he moved to Albuquerque, where he attacked a student and was caught by the police. When detectives from New Mexico handed over all the data to colleagues from Oregon, investigators in the Brooke case immediately suspected Patrick. The style of his previous crimes coincided with the circumstances under which the girl disappeared, and he was driving a green van the very day she was kidnapped. Detectives soon learned another interesting fact. On the day of Brooke's disappearance, Patrick was scheduled to appear in court on a drunk driving charge. However, he never showed up there, instead leaving a voice message on the court reception phone. The man stated that he had traveled to Corvallis and was on his way to court, but he never showed up that day. 2 days after Brooke disappeared, a man went to the hospital for emergency treatment, complaining of chest pain and high blood pressure. According to the detective, such signs often appear in people who have recently committed a serious crime due to nervous strain. This fact alone might not have seemed suspicious to them, but in combination with all the other points, it definitely deserved attention. After speaking with Patrick's sister and her husband where he lived, detectives learned that on the day of Brooke's abduction, he left early in the morning and did not return until nightfall. The sister also told a very strange story that happened on June 8, 2 weeks after Brooke disappeared. That day, Patrick returned home after a 3-day absence and stated that he had been kidnapped by some people with weapons and then held in an unknown location. He added that there was also a girl with blonde hair in the room who later died. The sister did not believe his story and did not give it much importance, given her brother's addiction to illegal substances. After this, the man, along with his wife and children, left for New Mexico. The detectives were almost certain that he was behind Brooke's kidnapping, but they needed to find at least some direct evidence. They tried to find the same van that Patrick drove, and soon they succeeded. Experts examined every inch of this car and found several blonde hairs on the carpet. In addition, they found a small bag containing a hair tie. Small traces of blood and semen were also found on the floor of the van, which were sent to the laboratory. DNA analysis showed that the found hair and blood particles belonged to Brooke, and traces of semen matched Patrick's DNA. All this was already enough to send the case to court. But there was a small snag. The man would first have to be tried in New Mexico for assaulting a student before Oregon cops could request his extradition. The trial began in the summer of 2005, and Patrick ultimately admitted to kidnapping the student. He was sentenced to 18 years in prison and was extradited to Oregon in 2008 for a new trial. Given the impressive array of evidence, the prosecution had no doubt that he would be able to achieve the death penalty. However, the trial could drag on for years, and Brooke's family wanted to know where her body was so they could hold a funeral. So they offered a deal to the prosecution. They will refuse the death penalty if Patrick reveals the location of Brooke's body and fully confesses to her murder, receiving a life sentence. At first, Patrick denied his guilt, and wanted to defend himself in court. However, over time, he changed his position. He eventually confessed to the kidnapping and murder, naming Brooke's burial site. According to his story, he came to Corvallis in the morning with one purpose: to kidnap some girl. He specifically took a van for this purpose and drove around near the university, looking for a suitable victim. Noticing Brooke, he first drove past, but soon returned. He drove up to her in a van, pretending to be a courier. Approaching the girl with a parcel in her hands, he pounced on her and threw her into the back. After that, he took her to the forest outside the city, where he abused her. Some time later, he drove into town to buy food, with Brooke still in his van. Returning to the forest, he left the girl there all night and killed her in the morning. Patrick also admitted that he wanted to kidnap 2 other women who reported a strange man in a van to the police. For this, he received additional charges. After the confession, Brooke's mother spoke to reporters, thanking the detectives for solving the case. She also thanked the criminal himself, are naming her daughter's burial place 5 years after the murder. Finally, Patrick added one condition to the deal. He asked to be sent to serve his sentence in the New Mexico State Penitentiary so that he could see his wife and children more often. Brooke's mom had to personally call the state governor and persuade him to accept the killer for life. As for Kim's son, who was the first suspect in this case, he served 7 years out of the required 11, having been released early for good behavior.